Welcome back, sci-fi fans. It's another episode of the Science Fictionary podcast, and I see Nicole is very very ready over there. So we're going to talk. It's going to be a spoiler discussion for Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. So if you haven't seen it, just consider yourself warned. It's going to be spoilery.
Very spoilery.
If you haven't learned by now, we don't do non-spoiler reviews because
We're
why
not
do
good
two
at it.
reviews? So.
It's not like we get our stuff out early enough that it's like, oh no spoilers. It's
Right.
came out yesterday because we got too much going on in life.
True.
All right. So Nicole is joining us tonight. Very glad to have you back. We haven't had. I guess we had you for some She-Hulk reviews, and glad to have you back for some more Marvel stuff.
I love hanging out with you, Marisha. I'm so excited to be
It's fun.
2 pots and a Gryffindor. I like it.
Yeah, that works.
So we've got. Let's see who all is in the chat. I know Megan's in here. Megan was in here looking for us promptly at 8:30. Sorry, Megan, we were a little late finishing up on the other show. It's a marathon tonight, and we're doing Coruscant Radio Underground and Science Fictionary back to back. I see Joker Voice and Dragon Buddy both in the chat. And I think that may be it for now, but we'll keep our eyes open to see if anybody else joins us. All right, so let's just jump right in. Nicole, I'm curious to see you've been hyped for this. So I want to know what you thought about the movie. Just kind of a general idea of what you liked and what you thought about it.
Okay, so I'm going to real quick address I saw Megan and wrote about there being a packed house. I too, both times that I've seen it, the place was packed. I know several times our AMC actually did sell out several of their showings, so that's a good sign. I got this really cool. This is awesome.
Oh wow, that is very cool.
Although it should be purple. It should not be blue. It should be purple.
Right.
Forever, but it's really cool. But it's got, look at all this beautiful detail. I have to show it off because it's gorgeous.
That is
It
very
is
nice.
Yes.
Yeah, I would have bought one of those if they would have had one.
Yeah, these were from through AMC. So I went twice so far. I would like to see it a third time in either 3D or 4D. We'll see. Hopefully this week. I loved it. I went with my friend Brandon. He actually might be here later because I know him and his daughter went to go see it again over the weekend. And he said that they really enjoyed it. My niece loved it. She is, she likes Marvel and she did enjoy this. And overall, we just really enjoyed it. I was excited to see a lot of nods from the comic books included. I loved how honoring and respectful this was to Chadwick, as well as Black Panther legacy. And that comes before even Chadwick ever even entered into the actual character as Black Panther. And so I thought that was very honoring. I don't know, there are little things that I just loved about this movie. It was very honoring to the heritage of Wakanda and real life heritage, in Africa, with Nelson Mandela. There were things that just really pulled at my heart. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was crying real good before the movie even started.
Yeah, the opening title sequence got Marissa.
3 times.
Man.
3. Because the beginning, Queen Ramonda, I'm saying that probably wrong. And that shocked me, by the way. I was like, I had full blown tears. My friend Brandon shows up finally in the thing. He'll tell you. I was tears. And then again at the end, I was like, oh.
Yeah. It was, so that one particularly got me. So, like my parents split up when I was really young. My grandparents were really, kind of parent figures in my life. So my life and all the way, my grandfather died about 6 weeks ago. So whenever the mom died, I was just like, all the sobbing and the, Iana saying, Mom, whoops, sorry. Giannis in the chat saying mom cried a lot, and mom did. Mom cried a whole lot.
Now, is Marisha in the chat, or is it your daughter this week?
That's
that's
it's Iana
Iana.
now.
Yeah.
So that's Iana saying that Marisha cried a lot.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to
Okay.
get her own YouTube profile because it's just getting sort of
Well,
confused.
welcome. What was your daughter's name? Is it
Iana.
Diana?
Yeah,
Aw.
but she's logged into my my YouTube profile because she likes to get in and talk in the chat. So
Right. Well,
just to make things a little more weird, because here's my face and there's my face over there, but it's a different me.
all right. So then to the chat. Let's be respectful then.
Yes.
So Marisha, I'll let you chime in next.
You know, I really enjoyed there were a lot of things that I really enjoyed about this movie. I thought that oh shoot, I don't even remember what they're called, the underwater people. I thought I thought they had a really interesting backstory, and I thought they did a good job kind of tying it in with Wakanda's story. I would honestly have to watch it again, I think, to get a good feel for if I think it is even a good movie, because I was so emotional about it.
Okay.
Like, I think that so much of what I took away from that was just how I felt about when Chadwick Boseman died, how I felt about just things going on in my life. You know, like it was like I really enjoyed the movie. But I think I would have to see it again to even get a good feel for objectively how great of a movie I think it was, just because it was such, all heartstrings were kind of involved in it for me.
Yeah.
But there were some things that I really I didn't expect. So whenever I saw Lake Bell show up, I was like, okay, so here's going to be our new like recurring Marvel character. And then like, oh no, she gone. That one really surprised me, just because she's kind of a notable name to show up for such a short cameo. But I really enjoyed the movie as much as one can enjoy it when they're sobbing their eyes out.
Yeah, I mean, so I do think they did a lot of things that were a really nice tribute to Chadwick Boseman, who he's one of those people we really like to kind of shine a light here on, people who are really, really great ambassadors for their franchise, for their film properties or TV properties. And he was just one of those guys. Like, he was just a great ambassador for Marvel from the time he showed up,
Yeah.
you know, until he passed.
And I know a lot of people who actually worked with him personally when he was doing Get On Up here in town. And he was very well liked. And I mean, here's the thing about actors and crew. If you're an ass, it doesn't matter how famous you are, the crew does not like you. And all of the crew that I know who worked with him, I think he was a little bit difficult because he was very method. Like, so it was, he wasn't always a simple person to work with, just because he was, you know, like he had to be a, you know, like they'd be like, hey, Mr. Boseman, you know, and so I dress him by his character name, like when they're driving him around town. But he was really well liked and really well respected, which is not always the case. And that's like by people that I personally know who worked with him before he actually blew up as Black Panther. You know, and I think it's, you know, because when he died, I was like, what an anticlimactic way for like such, you know, like as a story point, I was like, that's, you know, it I didn't feel like it was like a great story point. You know, it's like, and he died of a mysterious illness, but then it was like, and it felt a little pointless and a little anticlimactic. But in reality, like when somebody dies when they're, you know, in their 40s from cancer, it's anticlimactic and it seems pointless and it seems um just it's almost more tragic because it's not a big climax moment.
Yeah. Well, and
Um,
that's the conversation they're having in the chat right now. And
yeah.
it's like, look, I would have had a problem if they had put T'Challa, if they had T'Challa go out in some big way,
Mhm,
uh, you know, it would have been fine. But I think that a lot of the people that worked on this movie would have had a really hard time
mhm,
uh with doing that scene. I think that, and like you're saying, like sometimes our heroes don't die fighting the villain.
mhm,
No.
And so I don't know what they're gonna opt. I don't know if they're gonna flesh out anything about what it was that killed T'Challa, or if it was cancer, or they just kind of wanted to leave it vague. I think, and I think it was as much a nod to anything as that Chadwick Boseman was black. He was our Black Panther.
mhm,
I know that that character means something to some people that I can't really even comprehend, frankly.
mhm,
Hmm.
I saw this right before the movie came out, like a few months before the movie came out, maybe only like a month before. We were at Wizard World New Orleans, which is one of our bigger regional conventions, and seeing what that character, that movie that was coming, the movie wasn't even out,
mhm,
and seeing what the fact that that movie was being made meant to people.
mhm,
Hmm. Right.
Um,
I know
and
things that I had heard from like the staff and things like, not the staff, but well, yeah, the staff, the production, the directors and stuff, and the characters, and that is, you know, they felt this was very honoring.
mhm,
They were feeling this, you know what I mean? And I felt it. You know what I mean? You can feel their love and their emotions put into
mhm,
this, and I think that is also, I mean, what makes it more powerful and pulls our heartstrings a little bit more is knowing that they were also grieving with us, you
mhm.
know?
Yeah, and I think honestly, I think part of the reason they did this was for the people who worked with him before. The people, like, all of these people were very invested in Chadwick Boseman as a person, and I think in the common perception, sometimes the line kind of gets blurred
Mhm.
between the actor and like Luke Skywalker, for
Mhm.
example. To a lot of people, Mark Hamill is a Luke Skywalker. It's like or Charlton Heston.
Right.
Like, you know, all right, for the rest of your life, you're Moses. So everything you ever do, as long as you live, you have to go in it with the understanding that people think that you're straight up Moses. And I think that he was, to say that he's an actor, not Black Panther. I don't think that that's how a lot of people
well,
felt about it.
and I think here's the thing: like, if we were going to recast, I don't think you can do this movie for a couple more years anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
But
But
I'm just gonna say, like, for the sake of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if something had happened, yes, we've done recasting. The big recasting, the only major character recast has um, been the Hulk,
Mhm.
which, let's not forget that Disney didn't even make the first Hulk movie. It was just kind
Right.
of part of the deal when they bought it, and they've largely ignored that film.
Mhm.
But if, God forbid, something happened to Robert Downey Jr. 10 years into the MCU,
Mhm.
they're not recasting Iron Man.
No.
yeah,
No, because he is Iron Man.
right. And here's another thing. I'm gonna bring this up, and I've talked about it. I've sent you stuff on it now.
Mhm.
He says, well, there could be other Black Panthers. You're right, because guess what? In the comics, there was. You know what I mean? In the comic books, he actually was in a coma and stuff. You know what I mean? Things actually did happen to T'Challa, and guess who became the Black Panther? In the comics, 2009, by the way. Um, it was Shuri. And it's like
Yeah.
she took up the mantle. But this wasn't before wasn't just something all of a sudden. Okay, this is something from over 13 years ago that they've had in the works. So it's kind of like they kind of already knew that this was coming. So yeah, there are more Black Panthers, and they were in the comic books also, and there just may not be, what we're all envisioning. It might be better than we expected.
Side note, how did 2009 get to be 13 years ago?
Yeah, very good question. Very specifically, by the way, it was number 5. And even more, we'll get to Namor. When we get to that, I will talk about that.
So, yes, we have had some recastings here. War Machine, because the original actor was an ass. Banner, because the original actor was an ass. Thunderbolt Ross has not been a major character. I will give you the first 2 as major characters. I won't give you Thunderbolt Ross as a major character at this point in the MCU. So a recast, I'm not bothered by it. And of course, now the original actor is dead. And, there is an argument to be made. Like, we wouldn't recast Black Panther. Should we recast Thunderbolt Ross, or should we have just dropped it?
Right.
And so I think the argument is not even necessarily, we should have recast Black Panther. It's, should we have recast Thunderbolt Ross?
Yeah.
But those first 2, the actors did that to themselves.
Yeah. They don't like to do it. Like, they've really made it obvious. They do not like to do that. The whole recasting thing, which is why they lock actors in for 100 sequels in their contracts.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, they do. The optimal choice is never recasting characters in something like this. It does sort of break the continuity.
Yeah.
I forgot that wasn't you for a second.
She's not wrong.
He's not wrong.
Yeah.
So just let's kind of, we've talked about a lot. We really haven't even gotten into the movie itself yet.
Right. We've just kind of talked about the concepts and the discussions around the movie.
And I'm kind of on the same page as Marisha. I really want to see it again. It's not really a convenient option for us right now.
Yes.
Because we're 90 miles from a theater. But I do think that, like, it's one of the better Phase 4 movies. I still think it's very much a mid-tier Marvel movie for me, but I might change my mind on rewatching it. But when I say mid-tier Marvel movie, you have to keep in mind there are only
a compliment.
There's only a very small handful that I just don't like.
Right.
And there's none that I just absolutely despise. And I've even, they're even redeeming things about, I think I'm on board with what is largely considered the worst Marvel movie being the second Thor movie. But there are redeeming.
Eternals.
Do what?
I thought you were about to say Eternals.
I actually think that the second Thor movie is worse than Eternals. But Eternals falls apart in some places. I think that Thor is the more likable character than anything we got in Eternals.
It's true.
But those are my bottom. Those would be down at the bottom for me. And this isn't down there. This isn't a movie that I would throw at the bottom of the pile. It's very much mid-tier. I think the top 10 Marvel movies are incredibly solid films. So not an insult when I say that it's a mid-tier Marvel movie.
I don't know. I kind of think that I might like this one better on a second rewatch, just because I liked kind of some of the directions it went. I like kind of exploring. I always like to explore something new. Like, I felt one of the things I really enjoyed about the first Black Panther movie was, like, Wakanda is really different from anything we've seen before, which I thought was just super fun and interesting. And I kind of felt the same way about Namor's people in this one, and I'm gonna have to figure out what are they called? Their little people group there, because
DB posted it a minute ago. I can't remember.
Either way, I thought they were cool. I thought they were interesting. They were something really different. Because we've seen lots of, humans doing technology things. It's kind of like Asgard, and that it's something that's adds a completely different dimension, I think, to the MCU, which I enjoyed. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of a similar vibe to Wakanda, but it's definitely its own individual thing, which I think is kind of cool. And I think Namor is a really interesting villain. I think he's going to continue to be an interesting villain going forward.
So one of the things I sent to Andrew was something I just found tonight, and again, I have to still go back and read really all the way through the comic books. I'm very lucky. Power of a Girl is one of my favorite references, but I found that circa 2009, Shuri in Black Panther form took on Namor in number 11, and I'm like, what? Oh my gosh. So I cannot wait, because I've been saving up because I want to get a certain type of comic book that has them all, or most of them, from that. And I'm so excited. But when I saw it, I was like, what? She's already taken him on? This is so awesome. That really sets us up for the fact that they really were thinking about this ahead of time. And when they were looking at this, they still went and did some really good nods to the comic books. And I like that. And I can't wait to talk a little bit about Namor, because he also dropped the letter M word, and I'm excited because I had a major thought over the weekend, and I've been saving it for tonight. Because it's something I saw on ATSW Escape Pod. They mentioned something because somebody was really mad about a particular scene, and it hit me over the weekend, and I'm saving it for tonight just for y'all. So
what is it?
Okay. We're going to jump towards the end of the movie. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, so we know that Namor mentions the M word, mutant. Okay?
Right.
So, ATSW Escape Pod, which we, by the way, have we have Mr. Dragon Buddy here in the chat today. They were talking about Wakanda Forever the other day, and I was dying in the chat. I'm like, oh, I wish I was on the show because I wanted to talk about it. And somebody was upset about the ending when Shuri takes the blow to her chest, right, with her suit. And it occurred to me over the weekend, because again, he mentioned, and yes, he did say he was a mutant. And that is maybe a change that they're making in regards to the MCU, and that is how we're going to do it. And it occurred to me, she had taken some of that, to create the blue hemp and all that stuff, the purple hemp.
Yeah.
And taken some from his kingdom, right? What if that's part of it? What if that's part of the mutation? What if that's why she was able to come back so quickly? I'm like, my brain went nuts. Like, what if? You know what I mean? Like the show, what if? But that's part of the fun. That is part of the fun, because for me, it's not if some of my predictions get right, then they get them right. If some turn out wrong, but it's the fun. It's the imagination of what if. And I did realize that. I'm like, what if that mutation helped her to combat that?
I mean, it kind of tracks, because I think that the way they've been kind of playing with vibranium, I think that they're going to, I think that it's likely that they're going to kind of do some things with vibranium and mutants, and maybe, people with the mutant gene have had exposure to I think that it, I think that a lot of it is all going to kind of fit together. Like, they don't do any of this stuff by accident.
No, I do think, and that's what David really wanted to talk about tonight was, and we will do an audio podcast with him whenever he gets where he can, to talk about this. But he was really excited about some of the groundwork that this movie laid. And I think when we do look back on it in a few years, that's going to be the more important thing is the groundwork that's laid here is, maybe more, I think there may be some better stuff there than the movie actually is, than it is good. I think the movie's fine, but I think that it laid some really big important things in there. And I see Joker says that Namor is not a mutant. He's definitely a mutant in this movie. And
Mhm.
but
He
I
said
think that am I mistaken that Namor has always been a mutant?
I would need to do a double check.
Okay. I'm relatively certain that Namor has always been a mutant, but I would gladly
Not put money on that.
I would I wouldn't argue if somebody showed me proof, but I'm relatively certain that Namor has always been a mutant.
Well, and I think that they're starting to, well, we know since WandaVision, they're slowly
Mhm.
prepping 2025, 2026. I think we're going to
Mhm.
see this shift and it's going to be there. And I'm so excited
Mhm.
for it.
And we're seeing we've seen a lot of technology interacting with a mutant gene. Like that's pretty much the only way we've seen mutants manifest so far is interacting with some kind of alien tech.
Mhm.
So I think that that's pretty there's precedent, I think, for that.
So Namor the Submariner has been referred to specifically as a mutant since Fantastic Four Annual #1.
Well, thank you very much. Oh, and by the way, I actually got some Fantastic Four last week at the thrift store. Yes.
At the thrift store?
Yes.
Woohoo.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Okay.
impressive.
So getting back to Black Panther Wakanda Forever, because
Yes.
I don't want to get too off track with all my excitement.
Mhm.
I love the fact, I mean, and and what year was that? Did it say what year?
That comic.
Yes. Did it say?
That's what I was trying to look up.
So I have a reasoning, I think, why I'm asking this. So,
1963.
okay. Can you do me a lookup real quick? What year did Aquaman come out? Now, Namor is older than Aquaman. Let's make this very clear.
Right.
I know this. And what I'm thinking is I wonder if that is part of the reason, a part of the change.
Aquaman first appearance is in 1941.
I know that. Okay. I know that Namor's older than Aquaman. So I just wonder if maybe at some point, if that's part of the reasons why they, you know what I mean?
Right.
Added that because knowing that he's, you know what I mean? I did change it up.
Thank you, DB.
Work.
And yes, Aquaman 1941.
I think that part of the reason they had, the thing is, Namor and Aquaman were definitely kind of, side by side characters in the comics, but Marvel doesn't want to make the same story that, DC just did darn well. By the way, DC has not always hit things out of the park, but they did a really good job with Aquaman. And so Marvel does not want to make the same movie that DC just did a really good. If DC had done a crap job, yeah, Marvel might would have been like, and we did it better.
Yeah.
But they don't want to go head to head if they are not 1,000% sure they're going to win.
Right.
So I think that they decided to make Namor a really different character.
Right.
So I think that works.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I think your twin in the chat, I think she meant DB.
Yes, DB. There we go.
So, yeah, I mean, it's whatever the reason. I don't know why they made the change. I'm sure at some point we will hear all about why they made the decision.
Mhm.
I mean, I do think there's something to them not wanting to do Atlantis when DC's doing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that there's some really interesting things with this. So they created an interesting parallel between Wakanda and whatever are not Atlantis. I can't even think. That's the only problem is I can't remember
They're
the
not
names
Atlanteans.
Right.
They're Marvel Atlanteans.
But they did create interesting cultural parallels and historical parallels between the two nations.
Mhm.
That
There we go.
the Talican. Thank you, JV.
And it,
Um,
and they are very interesting under the water society, and it's really interesting because I thought that's why I want to go see it in 3D or 4D, is because I really just want to explore just like Shuri did. I want to like roam around and see what's down there, and it's just so neat.
mhm.
And it's so interesting because I love how they explain like what the face mask is versus Namor doesn't need that, and which is
'Cause he's
another
a
reason why
mutant.
that's what really could make him slightly more different,
Mhm. Yeah.
well, no, as a mutant, because the others didn't have that. He does.
Mhm.
So
She's not wrong. They do look a lot like the avatars in that new movie.
Yeah, I mean they did a lot of interesting things. I think they could have done, if they had done Atlantis, I think it would have been fine.
right, but I think they wanted
But
to steer away,
yeah.
from that.
So I don't mind it. I mean I honestly never thought we were going to get Namor. So the fact
Yeah.
that we got any version
Oh,
of
and how about
Namor
the
is,
name? I kind of wonder if using finding a linguistic reason for the name Namor may not have been part of the reason they decided to go with Hispanic, so they could actually have a
maybe.
a reason for either way. I feel like that was a really good backstory for the name Namor. That it kind of that's an interest that's interesting that's the origin of it. But I do kind of like the backstory for it. It's another one of those kind of like we were talking about in the last show. Good prequels set things up right that have significance in the story. So I feel like they did a good job kind of giving that name a significance that obviously it didn't originally have, but I feel like it worked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm doing too much reading in the chat here to be hosting. I do want to get down to really the point. Then what I do appreciate about this, and we'll come back and kind of get into all the different characters. And of course, we want to talk about Riri Williams and other characters that have been introduced. And but one of the things that I did want to talk about, or kind of the point, and the tribute to Chadwick, is that at the end of the day, his philosophy on life and the world wins out. In that where Shuri is presented with this opportunity to basically follow gosh, I'm having trouble with names tonight. Killmonger's philosophy.
Yes.
Killmonger and
When you guys were in like total surprise. I mean, when he showed up, I was like, I mean, again, I wish my friend Brandon was in the chat right now because he's talking, because we were both looking at each other like, just like you should have seen our faces. We were both like,
right. Well,
seriously, the expression, we were both in wow. And
my concern was that when they kind of dangle that carrot there for her is that they're going to sort of lionize Killmonger's beliefs. They're going to have her character take on his beliefs rather than T'Challa's. And I was I was immediately like, what a slap in the face that would be. Like, this is supposed to be a tribute to Chadwick, T'Challa, and I was very concerned where they were going to go with that, because it's not a problem with the movie itself. The first movie, though, was the number of people that latched onto Killmonger as the hero, as some sort of hero.
Right.
And he's not. And that belief is sort of scary that people would latch onto someone that villainous as the hero.
Well, that was the
Yes,
same
there
year
were things about what he believed that did cause, because T'Challa is wise. And so T'Challa was able to see what it was that enraged Killmonger so much and say, look, maybe we have done the wrong thing being so closed off from the world and hiding and not helping. And of course, that's part of what leads to Wakanda being there for Endgame,
Mhm.
is this stepping out of the shadows, coming out of hiding.
but he also
But he is most definitely the villain, and they have doubled down on it again and again. But when he showed up in this movie, about half of the theater we were in erupted in applause.
Yes.
And it's not for Michael B. Jordan, it's for Killmonger.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I sort of find that a little bit, disturbing to in some aspects. This is not meant to be a heroic character. And I really love, the thing that I like the most about this movie is that they doubled down on Killmonger's belief system
Yeah.
being flawed.
Mhm.
Agreed.
And
Mhm.
the thing that I always appreciated about T'Challa's character is that he could look at the things that Killmonger was saying and see like they come from a place of pain, and there's some legitimacy to his accusations. But his just because he has a point doesn't mean he's right about the solution. And
Mhm.
sometimes I think that we lose that perspective just in life. It's like, just because someone has a point and because they have been, um, in a myriad of different contexts, just because someone has a point doesn't mean that their solution is always valid or right. Yeah. Yeah, that's excellent. That's an excellent point. Like, she saw him because that's where she was. And I think honestly the fact that he's the person she saw is what sort of pulled her back from that precipice, being like, I don't
Mhm.
want to be that person. He's like, yeah, I'm
Mhm.
here because this is where you're at. And that's what made her realize, I think, I don't want to be him.
Mhm.
Um so I think it did what, like, I really did. I kind of halfway expected to see T'Challa. Um, and I think I think that would have been a very poignant thing, and I kind of wonder if they would use like deleted scenes from somewhere else, pull things, like they did with the Rise of Skywalker for Carrie Fisher. Um,
But I
but
think it's right in that way, in that
it,
sense.
it worked because it sort of made her realize what she was turning into. And she
Right.
never wanted to be that person. And
Correct.
the fact that was the person that she was relating the most to at that moment,
Mhm.
I think it was a little bit of a wake up call for her.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think that is something about Shuri that's not very Shuri. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Like, that's not who she is.
Mhm.
One of the things when we talk about things, well, I wish I would have seen, or maybe that's coming in the future, and that is, she's very spiritual. So we didn't get to, like, we got a little bit of
Mhm.
that at the end, and it's like, oh, I want to get to that. I want to see that because from what I know is that she's very spiritual, and I just wanted
Mhm.
to get that with that a vengeance, And I get it.
Mhm.
She was sad and grieving. We all are, and yeah. I'm just thinking about that scene again. I was so wowed with that and her seeing Killmonger.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But one of the other thing, I think my other favorite thing, I wish they had dug deeper into this. I think this is the thing that would have made it a better movie, like especially in light of our current world, where
Mhm.
this idea that science and spirituality are two separate things, they can't coexist. Um, is that it's not everybody believes that, but you have a large contingent of people that push that
Narrative.
concept that the
Yeah.
two are diametrically opposed things. And
New.
I think that this, and then of course, this is what Wakanda is a melding of spirituality and technology.
Mhm.
So
And we
to go ahead, finish.
no, go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. Oh, I
But
was just going to approach JB's question, but when you
yeah,
finish, I can approach that.
but I think that they do a, I think that they did a little bit of where they have this moment early on where, because we know that T'Challa was also, highly intelligent, a scientist, but he embraced this other thing, this more spiritual side, where Shuri has always embraced more of the science side, but they come from a spiritual culture. And she is at one point in her rage willing to throw away the spiritual side
Mm-hmm.
of her belief system, that this doesn't work anymore, and wants to go purely to technology to solve her problem. And I
Mm-hmm.
wish they had dug deeper into those
Right.
themes.
Yeah. Well, and I know again, based off of the knowledge and the references that I have used, that is based off the comic books and about the characters of Shuri, that yes, she was spiritual. We didn't get that, and maybe that's what's coming in the future. Maybe that's what we're going to see more of her. Yeah, she's science. Yeah, she's that. But you can both be science and spiritual at the
Well,
same
they're
time.
a highly developed scientific community, but I mean the impression that we get is that they're a very spiritual people.
Mhm.
Right.
We
And
see that
I
a lot in the first movie.
And I also
Mhm.
want to back up Shuri a little bit because in the sense that we know that in the first Black Panther and in the comic books, she helped to create a lot of his suits. She helped to create a lot of the inventions.
Mhm.
So it kind of makes sense that she was also next Black Panther. She was already making all of it
Mhm.
for
Well,
everybody.
and she's in the line of the king. Like she's
Right. Thank
supposed to
you.
be the next Black Panther. She
Right.
wasn't actually. If they were going to step outside of that, my personal preference was Nakia.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Nakia. I can't wait to talk about her. When we
But
get there.
I think that Nakia, and of course I like what they've done, and they wrote a reason why she hasn't been around, and
Mhm.
that works. But she was the character that always was the closest belief wise to T'Challa.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But now that makes sense in that she's the one raising his child.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
so I think that comes around again, but she's my absolute favorite character of the Wakandans outside of T'Challa. Was
Yeah.
always her character, and I did think, and my part of my reasoning for why I thought she should have been the next Black Panther was that I thought that she would be better suited to carry a film. I thought that actress was better suited to carry a film.
Mhm.
Well, and I think we're not done seeing Nakia. I think she still is going to play a big part into what's coming, obviously, in the
Mhm.
future.
She was
Um,
so interesting here.
yes, and that moment, that scene, and it's interesting because we actually got to see little Prince T'Challa, and we didn't know it. He was just a kid that
Mhm.
was there at the school, and none of us realized that this
Mhm.
is who he is. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden, that end credit, I was just like, I was still, again, I was like,
Mhm.
oh, heartstrings again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
And
So
he's so cute.
I
Oh
know he's
my
adorable.
gosh. So adorable.
What did you guys think about that moment when they come up on the beach and all of a sudden he's there and they're introducing us to
Mhm.
Prince T'Challa, son of King T'Challa? What did you guys think of that?
It's not because like at those moments where I was like, oh, it's sad. Like, I wish there was like a son or, that is kind of a trope, right? It's like, oh, but surprise, she's pregnant. Um, and to have him show up, um, I thought was it was emotionally, it did me good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because he just seems like such a because Nakia is such a precious kind of character, and their relationship was so special. And so, like, for her sake, I'm glad that she's got the little boy.
Right.
It's going to be really interesting to see what that does for the story. Like, I don't think that they threw that out there just to like, oh, and this makes you feel a little bit better that he's gone, because look, we've got little Prince T'Challa. And I guess it could have been that, but I think that they've got a direction that they're planning to go.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because when I was doing research afterwards, again, because that's what I like to do. When I like something, that's what I do. I just kind of start digging and continue to dig.
Yeah.
And I actually asked this question to the ATSW Escape Pod, and they didn't answer me. So I'm just now curious about it from you guys. So what I found is that in the comic book series, T'Challa does have a son. The Black Panther has a son, but it's not with Nakia. It is with, dare I say, Storm. Yes, I did, from X-Men. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Storm and T'Challa had a son. So in this case, instead of being Storm's son, is now Nakia's son with T'Challa. Right. So I'm curious what you think about that, because I'm like, whoa. Unless they do a multiverse looking thing there where he's got several sons out there somehow because of the multiverse, but I don't know. I think they're going to stick with the one, and they're going to change it from Storm to her. But I was like, wow, I think so too. That in the comics that actually Black Panther was with Storm. I'm like, I did not for that.
Crazy.
Thoughts and crazy.
Yeah, implications there.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess we don't have enough X-Men thing going on to.
No, where's Lunar Girl? DB, you need to ask. Because again, when I saw that, I was like, what? I'm still catching up on all my comic book reading.
Yeah, there's always plenty to catch up on in that comic. Like, I haven't really delved much into comic books because I've already got enough obsessions. It's like I feel like I'd be like that episode of Big Bang Theory where all the girlfriends decide that they're going to read comic books because they don't understand what the allure is. I just don't have that kind of time to. So I have to rely on other people's comic book obsession to fill in the gaps in my.
I have reference books and indexes and things.
Perfect.
JV's question. Me, myself, and I didn't start comic book reading until about under 6 years ago, 7 years ago, maybe.
Okay.
Because I didn't start until I heard about free comic book day at one of my local comic book shops. And because I didn't grow up in an area with a comic book store, I didn't read them. I didn't have them. They weren't at my disposal. In fact, the closest one at the time, I don't know, it was probably over an hour away, maybe more. I don't know, because again, I wasn't around. So I didn't start reading them until I happened to be in the suburbs where I had 3 or 4 at my disposal. And I'm like, what? And I'm a bookworm. So I was reading. And then I started picking up like reference books that really kind of took a lot of that information and started encompassing into one book. And I'm like, oh, thank you. And recently I got to meet with Darren Jensen again, which was awesome. He's a Marvel researcher, and he actually done, in fact, he did X-Men. I have to talk. I needed to see if I can still get it. And he did the X-Men index. And the index goes over each comic book that was done in a series with, it has all the names, all the locations, everything that's in it. But big information thing. And but the book itself is like that big. And I'm like, oh, I need that in my life.
Yeah, I've never been a big comic book reader. And when I have, it's largely been Star Wars comics. And so if there's something I want to know, I go dig and I'll read one to fill myself in on certain things. But I've never been a big comic reader. And when we started this show, we leaned really heavily on Daniel, who maybe eventually will come back to the show. But Daniel is a walking comic book encyclopedia.
David's not much. He's not far below Daniel in the comic
not with some characters. No,
encyclopedic. Whatever, you get the idea.
I'm making up words now.
Yeah, but you know you get where I'm at. He's a comic book encyclopedia, just to a little bit lesser extent. That's what I'm getting at.
I can't wait to meet him because now I'm like, I want to pick his brain.
Oh, he's a doll. We
Oh,
love
yeah.
him. He's like, I'm not old enough to be his mother, but Andrew's old enough to be his dad. And so we have a lot of fun with him.
Awesome.
So, that's true. I will give you that one.
It's true. However, the word that I was looking for does exist. I just couldn't make it come out of my mouth. So, alas, that's like my patented move. It's like there's the perfect word. I know that it's there, and I can like see it, but I can't make it, can't form it.
All right, so let's kind of back up and get into some different characters, and so let's start with the Queen. What did you think about the portrayal of the Queen in this
wow.
movie? Because I think we're gonna differ pretty widely on this one, because I really didn't like the portrayal of the Queen. Actually, I think she played it really well. I just don't think the Queen is very likable.
Hmm.
I think the Queen is way too. I think the Queen is way too Killmonger-ish at times.
Well, I'm impressed by JV's current comment.
As far as her acting, she's fantastic. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
Like,
I
man,
just don't know that I like the character.
she's a. It's so hard. It's interesting because it's like I love her, and at the same time, I see what you're talking about because she's so stern. But at the same time, we also have to remember that she's grieving and she's trying to be a leader at the same time. And grief looks different for each person and how it comes off.
Absolutely. The
And I think that's part of it.
that's
But
the thing
it's
about being a monarch, though,
Mhm.
is you don't have the privilege. I mean, not even just a leader. Be like in an actual traditional monarchy, you don't really have the privilege of grief the same way that other people do, because you are the figurehead, you are the political power, you are the last word on all the things.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things, one of the reasons that we don't really have absolute monarchs anymore, because it's just not a really good idea.
Well, you have the whole thing with the way she treats Okoye. Yes, Okoye lost that fight and lost Shuri, but at the same time, like, Okoye has been one of the most loyal members
Of it. Yep.
of the Dora Milaje, which, so she's been one of the most loyal subjects in all of Wakanda.
She follows the rules impartially.
And she's just immediately cast aside.
Right. And I think that was done out of scare and out of fear and grief.
Yeah.
I do feel like, while her decisions aren't always good ones, I do feel like they are very believable ones. Here's someone, she's lost her husband, she's lost the traditional way. Okoye's husband is in jail. She's lost the traditional way that their society runs. She lost the son who did all of these things, and now the daughter's gone. And so she just she snaps. She's finally been pushed over the edge.
Right.
And that's a very believable thing for a person to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make her a good monarch for doing it. Even though, but like I said, but it is very believable.
Right. And I think what we also have to remember, though, is, and actually we're seeing it kind of like right now in real life, and that is the changing of the guards, the changing of what's happening, and not everyone's going to like it. I mean, just like in real life, not everyone's going to like it. And I think that's what's happening in the movie and stuff. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the long run in the next one. Although I was still in shock, and then I cried all over again when she died. I
did too.
I bawled. I mean, pure, because I was like, what? Why? Like, why did they? this is a great character, and this just happened.
Yeah, I can't believe that they did that to us.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, seriously, it's like we were already like going to be so
heartbroken.
heartbroken about this movie, and then we're like, and also we're killing mommy. Like, but why? Like, and it as a story point, it does work because it was unexpected. And
Right.
And the fact is, sometimes when horrible things happen, everybody doesn't have plot armor.
Right.
It's like the Joss Whedon, arguments. Like, everybody can't always make it.
Right.
Because the stakes aren't really stakes if everybody always makes it. But come on, you already did that funeral to us. And now we're going to do it again? Like, that's just not very nice at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, this, like you mentioned, Okoye's husband being in jail. I don't think they're actually in jail. I think they were banished.
I thought that she said something. I thought
that she could still see him, so she can leave and go see him where he's at.
Okay.
But they've all been, because it wasn't just him; it's a whole bunch of them, and they're basically banished from Wakanda, or to live somewhere in the outskirts of the country.
Okay. I did actually wonder so when the bodies go up in that hovercraft thing, what do they do with them? I was like, do they just like let the thing go into a free fall and burn up in the atmosphere? Like, what do they take them to the moon? I don't know. I mean,
maybe they take it to a different burial place, a burial spot, or maybe into what do they call the mausoleums? Maybe. Yeah. I mean, it's thought. I don't have an exact answer. So
yeah, I think it was I expected them to show us the where it landed ultimately. So that one was a little surprising. And maybe it'll be a story point later on. I don't guess that it really matters ultimately, because that was the end of the funeral.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming that's just part of the ceremony, and that it's being taken to a burial spot would just be my assumption, but we don't really know.
Oh, I have to mention this because before we move on about Queen Ramonda and Shuri, and that is right before they met Namor, when they were there and the elephants were there. And I thought that was a great comparison, because it was, if I'm correct, it was a mother elephant and its child. And that was kind of like referencing Shuri and her mom.
Right.
Which that was interesting that they did that. I don't know, something that I thought is small details, but it does change the perspective a little bit. So
yeah.
So let's move on and talk about Joker's favorite character. Let's talk about Riri Williams.
Okay, so cool moment I have to mention when she mentions the Bulls, although personally the 90s Bulls was the best. Okay, let's just mention that as a Chicago sports fan. I need Bro here because he would back me. I think that he actually would back me on that one, even though he's not a sports ball fan. Because she mentioned the Bulls at the end of it. I'm like, yes, the Bulls, they're the best, even if they've been sucking since the golden age. But it's interesting because
I'm a Jordan fan, but I'll wave my Celtics flag.
I will give you that. I mean, Larry Bird, I will give you that, sir. But it's interesting. So again, going back to my first free comic book day, there was this huge sidewalk sale, and I bought up like crazy. And there was a whole collection of Hawkeye and Hawkeye, Thor and Lady Thor. I mean, this is like 2017. And I bought them. I mean, they had this huge sale, so I just bought because I wanted just to read. And I thought this was an excellent time to learn about all these additional characters that we have in Marvel and coming. And there was Iron Man and Ironheart, and I'm mad because I meant to grab that out because I actually have it in my comic book box. That's that. So I was waiting and I was excited for this character, and now I'm curious because they have some of the same things like she's from Chicago. She went to MIT, which of course we know Spider-Man, his friends did. But there were things that I know that they changed. So I'm just curious to how it's going to play out. Now I'm like, see how this really plays with her.
I think they had to remap this character a lot. I mean, the comic book was, and to some extent you're right, Joker. You could have taken her out of the movie and it wouldn't have made a lot of difference.
Did I lose you?
I can still
Can
hear
you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me? Because I cannot hear you.
Oh, really? That's
Well,
not-
can everybody in the chat still hear me?
Okay. I'm going to exit it and I'll come back in.
Okay.
Let me try that, okay? I'll be right back.
And would someone in the chat please let me know if you can actually hear me? Okay, good deal. We'll see when Nicole makes it back. But we good deal. I don't know what happened to Nicole's headphones there or her speaker or something, but what did you think about Riri Williams?
I mean, I think she's back.
Oh.
I think that she is.
Can you hear us?
Yay, hooray.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Awesome.
Great. I think she's potentially an interesting character, but I didn't feel like necessarily she was necessarily remarkably well utilized. As much as it was just like, okay, go find this. Oh, look, the scientist is, is 18, and which is fine, but I didn't feel like, I know they're planning to do things with this character, and I feel like as an introduction, it was maybe a little bit lackluster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we do know that the series is going to pick up immediately from where we left off with her.
Okay.
Right. Well, and it's just going to be interesting because in comparison to what I've read for the Iron Man and Ironheart, that was her original mentor. So I'm just curious as to how it's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a rumor about that one too. But I'm willing to give this character a chance because I think that I feel there's potential there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just not sure how they're going to shape it currently.
Yeah.
We'll see. Although I do feel they will. I think again, eventually Young Avengers are coming, and I think they're still shaping that. Okay. I think that they're ready to finally they're doing some handoffs, whether we like it or not. But that's because sometimes characters we as people have to sometimes learn to let go, deal with our emotions, and move on so we can get more of the story. But I'm curious as to how they're going to work her story now, because other than, she's a genius scientist and she's from Chicago and MIT, I'm just not sure how that's going to look right now.
Yeah. And I mean, they're going to remap the character some just because her comic book run didn't work. Her introduction, it was a pretty spectacular failure, her comic book release. So I'm sure they're going to retool the character somewhat to try to make it work better in the MCU. But I just don't know. This has been the biggest question mark on the MCU schedule for me because I don't know what they're going to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
I think it's because since they originally did her character, life happened. Okay. Things happen, we have Robert Downey Jr. who goes, I'm done to be out of I'm ready to be done with Iron Man. They changed who killed Thanos and then made it Iron Man versus Nebula, and then you have this. So I feel like this character's kind of getting reshaped, but at the same time, maybe it's a good thing. You know what I mean? Like maybe this is, sometimes you can take something that maybe wasn't really what it was and make it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's a good thing that they're retooling the character.
Right. I think this is a good opportunity to go back in and go, okay, how do we take this character and make her better? How can she be more successful?
Mm-hmm. And this isn't the first time that they've kind of done that with characters that weren't really huge successes, right, in the comics, and have been like, oh, let's do this guy.
Right. Right. And I
Um,
don't think every character, I don't think every person's going to like every character that they're going to place out there.
And,
I think
well, and that's the thing.
I connect with might be different than who Andrew connects with or you connect with,
Mhm.
Maria, or anybody in the chat. And that's what also makes it relatable, because just because we don't relate to her does not mean that there is not a young girl or young boy out there that are reading these comics and they like them or they like her in this movie because they relate to her. I know that my niece, who is 17, she liked her. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And maybe that's the thing. Maybe there, for her, she could relate to her. There were things that she's like, she found funny. So,
Yeah.
you
See, I get it. I get what you're saying, JV. I think I took it more as a tribute to Iron Man rather than just a ripoff.
That's
agreed.
always the thing, though. Anytime there's something that is intended as an homage, it can be perceived either way. It can be
Yeah.
perceived as a ripoff. It can be perceived as an homage, depending on depending on how strongly you felt about the original character and how you feel about the new one.
And again, I think this character could have been totally left out of the movie. I think you only put her in here to kick off her because it was a starting point for her show.
Mhm.
But you're right, Nicole, in that as this population, this is something we've talked a lot about on the podcast,
Mhm.
is the character population of the MCU is about to absolutely explode.
Mhm.
Mhm.
As we start bringing in Fantastic Four and all the villains that will come along with that, whatever expansion comes through Quantumania,
Mhm.
Mhm.
um, the X-Men, the
Oh,
population of characters is fixing to just absolutely explode.
mhm.
Everybody's not going to like every character,
Absolutely.
Right.
especially now when you do movies, you really need the vast majority of the audience to like the character.
Mhm.
That's not
Mhm.
really true of TV shows.
That's true.
Mhm.
TV shows can be a little more focused. I mean, She-Hulk is the perfect example of that. A lot of people just did not connect with She-Hulk at all, and I get it.
Mhm.
That's because they called out everybody beforehand. And there's no such thing as the MCU because, like, just like I was talking about today, this stuff was out since before 2000. I mean, since 2009, before Kevin Feige's quote that if it didn't happen, maybe all that garbage that people spam out there
Yeah.
say.
So
You
this
know,
Um,
my favorite character, Captain America. I have very, very strong reasons for why Captain America is my favorite character.
I love
But a lot of people see Captain America the same way they see Superman. He's too goody two shoes, and they don't like that.
Mhm.
Um, and
Yeah.
and I get it. But again, I have very specific reasons that that's my favorite character. I connect with that character on a very basic level.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yes.
So
And
this kind of circles back to something we talked about just a minute ago. So it seems like none of us really absolutely love the introduction for Riri Williams in this. So what do y'all think would have been because Megan kind of uh phrased this question a couple of different ways. What do y'all think would have been maybe a more effective introduction for her where she wasn't just kind of like, and here's something we shoehorned in here just a little bit because we need to introduce her?
I honestly think with this character, because of what she represents in this kind of like picking up on Tony Stark's research, in some extent, and I don't know how they're going to change it. You know, in the comics, she's kind of like following in his footsteps. In
right.
this, we don't like. It's obvious that she's been inspired, as the whole world has been inspired by Iron Man at this point.
Right. Well, and
But
he
I
had
don't think this character. At this point, I don't think this character or this actress were ready to carry a movie.
Mm.
Yeah, I think, or I feel like he had so many that he mentored. And so, of course, they didn't get a chance to show us all of that. They didn't get
Right.
us, we only got to see Spider-Man being mentored. We never got to see Iron Man mentoring yet. Iron Heart. So we'll see what happens with her. And again, I feel she's full of potential. I really believe, that there are going to be people out there that are going to enjoy this character. Whether you want to trash her or not trash her, or a person chooses to trash them or trash them. I'm not saying directly to you or Mersha, just in general.
Mhm.
Trash this character, that there are going to be people who are going to, I think, going to enjoy this character, and we'll
Yeah.
just see.
And of course, where they go with it, the show's happening. It's already, I think it's actually due up relatively soon.
Mhm.
We'll see. I mean, it
Mhm.
may be that nobody watches it. If
Mhm.
nobody watches it, they will change direction with it. They'll either drop the character altogether or they will figure out how to retool it. I mean, the thing is like, yes, they have made some decisions that a lot of people who've been following the MCU from the beginning are kind of like, I don't know how I feel about that. Their main interest is still in making money.
Mhm.
And yes, phase 4 it's kind of been in trouble with money. And it hasn't all been because all the movies are bad. It's because nobody's making a lot of money with movies since COVID started.
Mhm.
COVID's a big, I mean, yeah, it's a big reason. It's not just like,
We're probably still looking another 2 years before the theaters actually recover.
Yeah.
And it'll be, and some of them won't. I mean, Regal, we still don't know what's going to happen with Regal Cinemas. They're
oh, okay, hold on. So before we move on, okay, we got to talk about this. Because they didn't talk about it. So this might be how she ties into Black Panther Wakanda Forever with Ironheart, okay? We know she's at college. We know that a professor was having her do this for credit. We don't know the professor. Y'all, this could be a big moment, because that could have also set up for either the next Black Panther or one of the next big baddies that are coming into the Marvels universe. Because if I'm correct, somebody wants to pull it up. I think Professor Doom, was he a professor? I think Doom was a professor.
Ooh.
I think so.
Ah.
So, see, so while we think it might be for some, look, see, each person, it's kind of like when you go thrifting. Somebody else's trash is somebody else's treasure. And this could be a very treasuring moment. And that is that professor could be another big baddie that's coming. And I will totally challenge that. I think that's what's going to be coming. We'll see.
That'll be really interesting. And it's always, and even if that isn't what they were intending to do right now, they could always at a later point be like, oh, and by the way,
Exactly. By the way,
hey, we have we have definitely always intended,
right.
like George Lucas, like, yeah, Luke and Leia were always going to be siblings, and Darth Vader was always going to be the father, which has become just what people like to do. Like, oh, that was always the plan. Bullshit. Wasn't always the plan. But even if it wasn't always the plan, that doesn't mean they can't go that direction in the future, which
Right.
I think would be an interesting kind of twist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If they kind of basically had her involved in some kind of conspiracy.
Yeah.
Basically. I mean, well, obviously we know she kind of is unknowingly, but we just don't know any of the other moving parts.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, now as far as conspiracies and cracking them and all that good stuff, I'm always a fan of any time Bilbo Baggins, Martin Freeman shows up in anything. He's always one of my favorite. And I did enjoy kind of getting to see him and Val interact a little bit.
Oh, how about that revelation?
Right?
The Val being his ex-wife.
Right. And also the new head of
yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. When she showed up, when Val showed up, I had my mouth dropped and I looked at I was like, okay, here we go. We know they're setting up. We know they're preparing for Secret Wars. We know they're preparing for more. So this just adds to it. And I'm excited to see where that goes, because you just know that they're setting up stuff. And I'm just like, yes.
And so, I mean, definitely they're going to eventually, like here in a minute, we're going to wind up with Val and her long lost love on opposite sides of whatever this is, because and honestly, you feel like this is what made them not work, is she's totally amoral and he's a true believer.
Yeah.
Like, he's gung-ho about, he's the Captain America acolyte and all of this, and she's just willing to do what
Mhm.
whatever it takes to further the agenda she's got going on.
Mhm.
So I'll be interesting to see where that direction, where that dynamic goes, because I think that's definitely going to play. And I just, whenever there, where he got arrested, I was like, well, we know who's coming to bust him out.
Mhm.
Like, we know that 100% Shuri's showing up because he's her buddy,
Right.
and she can't have him go
Mm-mm.
to the deep dark hole.
Right. Even if well, technically she sent the door Blanche, but still, we knew he was not, no, he wasn't going down that way. She wasn't going to have it. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. And I also keep wondering, though, if we'll see, like, in Secret, in Thunderbolts, it'll be Thunderbolts, if we'll see any more with Bucky with the Wakandians, that makes me kind of excited to see if we'll see any more.
Yeah.
Although I want him on the side of the Wakandans. I love Bucky, and I don't want to be mad at Bucky after he, quoted Tolkien. Like, I can't have a character who steals my heart because he's quoting Tolkien, and then me not like it.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what they're going to do, because you've got a couple of characters that I don't think are going to wind up. I mean, obviously, a lot of the Thunderbolts are going to wind up being villains, but I don't think that some of the characters like Bucky are aware of that at this point. I think that they're going to go into this thinking, because they're working for the government, right?
Right.
So they're going to think they're working on the right side.
This is
And
legit.
rumors out there right now that it's going to be Hyperion. Is going to be the villain in that film, which is like, super, super powerful villain. I don't know how, I kind of wonder how they're going to fight said basically Superman level
Is that the
power
one that
set.
there was talk about Henry Cavill playing?
Yeah, there were some rumors. Right now, I think they're saying, I don't remember who I saw, Ryan Gosling and someone else.
Yeah. No, but that is the character, right?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We've got a little bit of time, and rumors are great, but in the end of the day, I like the official word.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, Joker. I mean, I get it. Like, there have been. I mean, I saw you mentioned a couple of billion-dollar movies since COVID. There's actually, as far as I'm aware, there's three. Because I think even Jurassic World Dominion made $1 billion. But Megan is right. Like, all three of those play really heavily on nostalgia to drive people to the theater. Spider-Man, Jurassic Park, and Top Gun. All three,
Yeah,
it's
nostalgia.
like, I
And
mean,
they
there's
weren't
only like
just
50 movies that have ever made $1 billion. So $1 billion is like, yeah, it's nice, but like, I don't think any studios are going, this movie has to make $1 billion or it's
or
a
it's a
failure.
failure, yeah.
I mean, this movie has Wakanda Forever has underperformed. There's no doubt about that. I actually kind of agree with that, Joker voice. I think he's kind of perfect. It's just may cause confusion between the two characters. But the thing is, it's already getting close to 600 million, which, it's probably going to top out around 700 million worldwide, which
And
is,
it's not playing in China, which
and
never
that, yes,
has.
and it was cut out of the second biggest market out there.
Mhm.
What I found was that this movie cost a quarter of a million, or a quarter of a million. It cost $250 million to make. So it has made money. That's enough to cover the cost plus the marketing.
Advertising, yeah.
So it's made money, and I think it's going to top out. Even if it makes $700 million, I will agree it underperformed. But it still made money, and will make it one of the most, I guess we'll make it the second most successful release in phase 4.
Mhm. Yeah, it's been a bad, we aren't the only people who haven't seen as many movies in the past 2 years.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't agree with the studio. I mean, I think the studios would love to make $1 billion on every movie, but with 50 movies, like 50 or 51 movies ever having reached that. I just don't think they're saying, oh, it has to make $1 billion.
Mhm.
Right. And then you always have the cult classics. There are movies out there that the critics didn't like, and maybe the first to run around, wasn't popular, but guess what? Still, you know what I mean? Maybe later on it became a cult classic. People still like
Yeah.
it later. And that's a possibility too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
that'll be interesting to see. And like we said, anytime a movie doesn't play in China, it's not going to make $1 billion if it doesn't play in China. I
No.
think that's probably just the fact. And honestly, just as a person with a moral compass, I would really rather Hollywood quit pandering to China like
Mhm.
Hollywood pandered to the Nazis, and
Yes.
just give up on it and just have a little bit of integrity.
Yep.
But that's just me.
Yeah. No.
And I understand that ultimately the almighty dollar wins, but I'm okay with that.
No, I mean
Ultimately.
they will gladly, bend the knee to China when it comes to a lot of things, but we are starting to see some studios less concerned with doing it.
Yep. More power
Including
to 'em.
including Disney. Well, including Marvel.
Mhm.
Star Wars has not shown. That was a big problem with the sequel trilogy, was that they bent over backwards to make sure those movies released in China.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And minimizing, they're bending over backwards for China to do everything that they're accusing a lot of Americans of, and
Right.
racism and these things. And but they will, just about cut um Finn out of the movie altogether just to get that movie dropped over there. There was another instance that we never really talked about. Um they minimized some merchandise. There was
Mhm.
a shirt that had Rose Tico on the front of it that said Rebel across the top. It was one of these things. It was supposed to be coming out when the protests started in Hong Kong.
Mhm.
That shirt vanished off the market. And I'm 100% convinced that it was because they didn't want to put the face of an Asian actress on a shirt that said rebel during the middle of all that, because it was going to upset China. And
Upset them. Do it anyways. I would have bought it.
yeah,
Right.
so I'm
I would have bought it.
100. Yeah. So yeah, I don't mind that these things aren't, that China has gotten so strict these things aren't releasing, because maybe the studios will quit pandering, because that's
Yeah.
sort of despicable.
Mhm.
So, hey, how about that Wakanda Forever?
So let's see what other character. Well, let's just talk. We talked a little bit about Nakia, but we
She
didn't
looks
get.
so great. Y'all, her
Yeah.
costumes are amazing.
Yeah, they were beautiful.
Yeah.
I did like her costumes.
Yeah. Well, if anything, I just felt like we didn't get enough of her. I feel
And
like.
I think we were going to see a lot more of her next time.
In the future. Yep.
Mhm.
Well, and the word is right now that they're pushing ahead pretty quick to go ahead and make a third film.
Well, and it said Black Panther will return. I've also heard something about maybe a series coming. So
Yeah, there
I'm
have been some rumors about a series of some sort.
I'm just curious if we're going to get a movie or if we're going to get a series instead.
Well, we kind of leave this off in a place where we don't really know exactly where everybody's
Right.
going and what they're doing. You kind of leave this off with, Shuri has gone off to visit Nakia, and M'Baku is sort of making his claim to the throne.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
But you don't know that it's not, like, I don't know that Shuri wanted to sit on the throne.
Yeah, but I have a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Ciao Joker. It's been fun.
Oh,
Since my phone died, and so I can't comment as
okay.
me either way. Yeah, that was an interesting decision.
So
Yeah.
you're not down for King M'Baku?
King M'Baku is fun. I like M'Baku. but I think it's sad that they're going. The dynasty seems to be, especially
Well,
since there is an heir apparent. Like the
right. And
dynasty is going
I'm
somewhere else.
curious to see what's going to happen because now that we know that there's Prince T'Challa,
Mm-hmm.
I gotta do some research. It's going to take me reading a couple more comics and kind of seeing where I think they might head with this because it's like, at what point are we going to finally get it? What point are they going to do some time jumps here and get to that?
And see, I don't think we're going to do any time jumps because one, they want to keep it in sync with the rest of the MCU, and we've already, I mean, the MCU is already now several years ahead. It always ran concurrent with our time, and it's actually now several years ahead of us.
Right.
I guess 5 years ahead of us.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, the kids, how old?
6.
So, I mean, they play the long game. 10 years from, they could just be setting this up as a potential option 10 years from now.
Yeah, but then that kind of, I don't know, maybe he'll show up in not maybe the Young Avengers, but something else, because I feel like we have Miss Marvel now, and we've got a few others. But at the same time, we could see Prince T'Challa also show up with WandaVision's kids. I mean, Wanda's and the Scarlet Witch's kids. I mean, that's also a possibility.
They're about the same age. I mean, not about the same maturity level, at least.
Yeah. So, I don't.
But they do also have like those different superpowers and things. So we'll see. It'll be fun to see how this rolls out. Part of the fun.
So what do you think about M'Baku on the throne, Nicole?
Yes and no. It kind of makes sense because then you'd still keep Shuri as the Black Panther. I don't think he officially has it though, and I don't know.
See, I sort of think that he shows up, and when he says, I challenge, I think it's sort of a joke.
Right. And I think the book, like when I was reading this, The Power of a Girl, I was reading up about Shuri, it says that she did become queen for a little while. So it's also possible she could be holding that throne, that throne until Prince T'Challa is old enough to take it over. That's also a possibility.
Yeah. And I think M'Baku is just going to basically be a close advisor in what she does. I think that's the role he's showing up in. And I think we're probably going to get a series, the rumored series that was going to kind of deal with the fallout of all this and what the country looks like now. So we're also kind of playing in some storylines that do lead to a big civil war within Wakanda.
Right.
So
which we kind of already did, but I guess we may do it again.
So, can the Wakandans name a champion basically as their representative in the combat? Is that anything they have any precedent for?
How that work, because technically Shuri's already claimed the Black Panther. She's unless they redo it and her and have that battle again, that official battle. But
yeah,
let's see.
No, I mean, I don't think M'Baku, I don't think he's going to be the new Black Panther. I think Shuri is our Black Panther for the foreseeable future.
And trust me, by the way, I was so excited that they kept that. But I think you're right. I think it makes sense now that he would be more like a royal advisor, basically, a mentor, or here, this is how I see it. And in some ways, maybe that'll help to keep peace. I think that's very important.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting, and then we've got new things in play here, specifically the Midnight Angels, that's kind of the storyline that does play into the Civil War that happens with Wakanda.
Didn't love those costumes.
I really did not like the costumes.
The costumes were awful, but what's worse is that that's how they were designed in the comic books, and I'm like.
I went back and looked because I was like, man, did they just pull this from the comics? Because I'll feel a little better about it if they at least stayed true to the comic. And they did.
So I think that's
terrible looking.
Well, I'm thinking that's why they made fun of it, because I think they knew, kind of like with She-Hulk, they're like, we know the audience is going to make fun of this. we know that they're not going to like this. So we're just going to, we're going to make it, we're going to be part of the punchline. We're going to be part of the gag. We're going to be on this side with the audience laughing at this with them. Because they knew, they're like, oh, yeah, that was awful. But
Yeah,
you
so I'm
know,
hoping that when we come back around, we see a redesigned.
Okay,
Oh.
Okoye has notes.
please.
What?
Okoye has notes.
Okoye, yeah.
She hates it.
Yeah, she hated them.
Mhm.
And she was honest. She's just like, what are these? Are ugly. Exactly. It's like they knew, just like with She-Hulk, they knew that us as the audience would not agree with that. Or maybe because those who did see that comic book went, what were y'all thinking? So instead of giving us something new, they went, here, we're going to be with you on this. We agree with you, and this is how we're going to show you that we agree with you.
Well, like DB was saying earlier, she's that Gen Xer who doesn't like things to change. She's like, no, do it the old way.
Get off my lawn.
Well, one of the better jokes with Okoye is when they go looking for Riri Williams, and she's like tells Shuri to wear something subtle, and Shuri's just looking at her like, "This is what you think is subtle."
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I really like, Okoye and Nakia are really my two favorite characters left.
Okoye and Shuri had a really good dynamic.
They did, and that's the thing. Some of the characters do have a really good dynamic together. I think the dialogue between characters is well done. I think Angela Bassett probably wins an award for this movie.
Oh my gosh, so many people. Even the night we went, I just was hearing buzz. Like, she needs to be up for an award for this, and I was just like, wow. And then I was like, oh, you watch, it'll be for a Saturn Award and People Choice.
Yeah.
But I'm like, but it would be kind of cool if she got more for this. And it finally, brought some attention into the Marvel universe. So, we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a couple of performances in Marvel that probably should have won awards previously. And they just, but that's always been the case with the big award shows.
Right. With the Academy. So I will just, I support, award shows like, the Saturn Awards, the Parsec Awards, the People's Choice Awards. We get to decide.
The Saturn Awards are a really, really important thing in that world. I mean, I will argue up and down that the most important genre out there is science fiction, and it's the most overlooked by the big awards shows.
Academy.
And
yes,
the Saturn Awards are smaller. It's a nonprofit, but they still do. They're still really important for what they are. They've just never grown like the other shows have.
They changed the timing of it and the length of it.
Yeah, it's very long.
Like when you and I were up late watching, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" This is
hey, at least they had a good host.
This is very true this year. However, I wish they would break it up then, how the Academy does it, and like the regular Oscars, and do so many hours, and then maybe host like something beforehand for other stuff.
Yeah,
to make it and bring it, because I think it should be brought a little bit stronger. I believe in our science fiction and our Marvel. So
what else? What other characters do we need to kind of discuss here?
I mean, I think we kind of have touched on everything. I mean, it's a long movie. I think that we could probably be here all night, but I think that we've at least touched on pretty much everything that's
well, we haven't talked about one more that we need to we have to talk about before we quit, is we really haven't discussed Namor at all.
Only briefly.
Well, not just character per se. Like we discussed
the concept of Namor.
Right. We discussed him, the character conceptually, but like let's talk about like how he's portrayed.
Yeah. I thought the actor did a great job on Namor. I mean, he was believable. I felt, I could understand his process of thinking, his perspective. And at the same time, it's like I agree with you at some points, but you lost me at others.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So
The one thing that they really need to show with Namor is how he knows so much about what's going on in the world.
yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe that's
Because,
what we're more of.
yeah.
Maybe they just want to give us a glimpse and saving more for later.
I mean, that's the other thing. They haven't told us when, when Namor's coming back. We don't know when we're going to see that character again. But,
Mhm.
we do leave off with him in an interesting place where, some of them are mad at him about making the deal with the Wakandans. And
Mhm.
he's basically like, we're going to be friends with the Wakandans so that in the end we get what we want.
Oh yeah, what a double-edged sword, basically,
Mhm.
right? Because it's like he did it, but he did it for different reasons than what Shuri did.
Yeah,
Shuri be more like T'Challa. She's trying to, and again, we're going to see her grow as a leader. Is she going to make mistakes? Absolutely. And how do I know? Because even from what I realize, again, in the reference books, she was not the best queen, but she tried. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
but that's part of growing and becoming your own leader. You're gonna make mistakes. Life happens. So,
He's also much older and much more jaded than she is.
yes,
And
yeah,
that's the risk of living forever.
yeah.
Is that
Done
I
more.
mean, even I just 18-year-old me and 35-year-old me, I'm a much more jaded person than I was.
Yeah.
Just because life is a bitch sometimes.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and I'm curious though now if this will somehow connect with like the Eternals and things, because that means he's been around as long as they have. So I'm just very curious where that will lead.
well, no, he's only been around since
I think
the
it was about
1600s.
500 years, 600 years. So.
But at some point I'm like, do they not know about him yet?
Right? Have they?
Right.
How did
Well, and
he
the other interesting thing, there's several interesting things. Where did the fact that there is vibranium there means that there's more to the story about the meteorite.
Mhm.
And I've
Yeah.
seen some really, really interesting theories on that. And, it's going
Mhm.
to be interesting to see what they go with. But
Mhm.
in the end, it's a comic book universe, and I know people like, well, how can this be true if they didn't tell us about this before? And it's like, well,
Hmm.
do you want the X-Men or do you not? Like,
Yeah.
at
Right.
some point, you just have to say, okay, give me the X-Men, and I'm going to buy the reason that you give me why they now exist.
Mhm.
Right.
Like, and the same with Namor. Like, well, how do we not know about Namor before? And it's like, I don't care. Like, he's here now, and
Right.
They have
you
to give us
just
a
Yeah.
reasonably plausible explanation, and then we just have to suspend.
don't overcomplicate the
What is
answer.
the
Just give us a reason, and let's move
suspension?
on.
We have
Tell
to
the story.
suspend our belief enough to buy it.
Yeah.
Because there's never going to be a totally airtight reason why this thing is just now showing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about you? Any other thoughts on Namor himself?
It's not a very nice person.
Right. Well, that's fitting. Like, they threw out the Atlantean stuff and kind of rewrote it, and M'Baku even compares him to the
Mer-
feather serpent god.
And that's who he
Big
claims. That's
fan.
the
Well, that's who
title.
he claims he is, but that predates that mythology predates Namor a good bit, by a good bit, 1,000 years at least. But yeah, this is the title that he's been giving, maybe even by his own people. Although nobody else calls him, we don't hear his people call him Kukulkan. M'Baku is the
Oh,
only person that's the feather serpent god. And that's who we hear M'Baku refer to him as. Um, so, but it's basically M'Baku's point was, you're going to kill their god. Like, what do you think's going to happen?
right.
History says that killing people's gods does not make that thing die down.
Yeah. And then that scene with Namor as a kid, wow. I was just like, it did pull my heart. I mean, it tugged on my heartstrings a lot. And I was like, wow. Like with him watching And then, of course, then he turned around and went, okay, whew, and everything else went up into fire and smoke. And I was like, whoa, and if that's what he was doing at that young age, what he could do now or will do.
Right.
Yep. I think he'll be an interesting character going forward. And I think that he's one that can go either direction as far as the heroic dynamic. I think he could be full on Magneto. Like he's got a reason why he's that way.
Okay, so the deal with this character in the comics is that he can show up sometimes and he can play ball and be a good guy, but more often than not, he shows up declaring war on the surface world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's very much one of the I guess he's probably Marvel's first comic book anti-hero.
Yeah. It's
and
like
sometimes he's just straight up the villain.
Yeah, he just has this personal vendetta. And it's like he wants to keep going for it, even if it takes him 50, 60 tries. He's just going to keep going back around in the circle. Yeah.
So, I think he'll be an interesting character going forward. I think he's a good addition to the mythology. And I thought he's a really good villain for this story.
Yeah.
Because I think all the best villains, not all the best villains, but sometimes it's really interesting to have a little bit of a insight into the reason why a villain is the way they are. And I feel like at this point, he's more a Magneto than anybody else. He's got that. He's got a reason why he hates these people.
Right.
So I think it's going to be a really interesting story going forward.
Yeah.
And his little wings on his feet.
I wondered when they first announced they were doing Namor, I really wondered if they would actually do that.
I mean, he's just straight up Quicksilver, right? He's
Hermes.
Yeah,
in some ways. It starts off, Atlantis is a Greek myth. So, so of course, they used Greek, elements from the Greek gods in developing that character. So, I'm glad they didn't throw those things away. It kind of keeps it grounded in the comics. And
agreed.
Keep Marvel weird.
Nothing wrong with weird.
Nope, for sure.
All right. Well, any more thoughts before we could talk about this movie forever because there's a lot in it. And I really am anxious to see it again because I generally, before when we had a theater, I rarely like to talk about a movie before I saw it twice. Because especially one like this, where the first time you're really processing you're processing Chadwick Boseman's death again. And and so you're kind of looking at it through that lens, and I'd like to see it again where I don't necessarily have to process it that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a good movie, a good entry. It wraps up a really phase 4. I think you can make it. I don't think it's a stretch to say that it's the weakest of the 4 phases in Marvel.
Because it's the first thing since we ended the big
right
story that we've been telling.
But it's also the grieving over all the things that happened because of the first 3 phases.
I also feel like it's what you make of it, because you can go, oh, this is trash, this is garbage, this is the worst thing ever, it's the weakest. However, you also got to remember, we're not at the top of the mountain again.
Exactly. 100%. You couldn't just, and we've talked about that a lot. You could not just keep building forever. You had to come back down to earth and reset. You had to.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's what's happened here. And I think it's all in a matter of perspective and your attitude and the way you're willing to approach it.
100%.
Each person's different of how they're going to approach it,
Well, in this phase does something else that I think probably makes some people go, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. And it's this very melancholy tone that paints all of phase 4.
Right. But I can't say that I did not dislike Phase 4. I mean, I loved
No,
WandaVision.
I like a lot of the stuff in Phase 4, and I was really more talking the movies than the TV shows because obviously we didn't have TV shows before Phase 4, so there's really nothing
Right.
to compare it to. But
And I think what we also have to remember is that Phase 4, a lot of these movies were impacted because of COVID, and the shows were impacted because of real life that was happening around us. And I think that
100%.
people
Well,
forget that some of these movies were supposed to probably be out sooner, and they got pushed back, and now they're trying to probably realign it to make it
yeah.
as best as they can do for us. Like they're trying to make it better for us fans, but not every fan's going
Look,
to.
I mean, the thing is like it's real easy to point a finger at a studio
Right.
and say you're just making garbage.
Right.
But the truth is, they don't have any. There's no gain. There's nothing for them to gain by making bad products.
Right.
And I don't believe they're making bad product. I don't think any, with the exception of maybe the Eternals, I don't think there's any that are just bad. And I think there are a lot of really redeeming things about the Eternals. There are some things they set up that I like a lot. I think the story fell apart in the third act.
Oh, I could go on to it about Eternals another day.
But I love the concept. I like the way they introduced them. I liked a lot of the characters. It just missed in some really important spots. But yeah, you had to rebuild. And I think Phase 4 lays out a really, really good foundation for stuff going forward. That it has that melancholy tone, which I understand some people are going to watch that and they're going to back up because it's because of the melancholy tone. It's not the normal, just fun Marvel fare.
Right.
There's a lot of death, there's a lot of grieving in all these movies. We only have one thing left in Phase 4. Because I mistakenly said last week that this concluded Phase 4, but actually the Guardians Christmas special is the end of Phase 4, which is Peter grieving over Gamora.
Yeah.
And his friends trying to cheer him up.
And honestly, it has
a lot of grief.
Yeah.
But also I think the fact that it's a little bit unfortunate for Marvel that all of these stories about grief coincided with a really, really difficult season.
Right.
For everybody. Like the past 2 years have just been brutally hard on so many different levels for everybody on the daggum planet.
All right. Well, I mean, that's what happened. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they had to totally retool that whole show.
Yeah.
Because it was about a virus.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's really no way to downplay the effect COVID has had on the movie industry. And I mean, Marisha works in the industry. It still has an effect.
Yeah.
And that's not going away. I think things are getting better. And I think as far as what we as cinema goers and viewers, we're seeing less and less of the impact. But I think people that are still working in the industry are still very much feeling the impact.
Right.
It's one of the few industries where you still have to wear a mask to work a lot of times.
And the hospitals. Yes.
Yeah.
And the hospitals.
But I think it's, like I said, I think it's just unfortunate that the hard stories kind of correlated to just life being hard. And I think some people just weren't up for more sad in their their diversions right now. And it's just sort of how it fell out. But I am, like Andrew said, I think they've laid a lot of interesting groundwork that I think is going to go some really interesting places.
I agree.
So if you're still here, Megan, redeeming stuff in the Dark World, it is peak Loki.
Peak Loki.
One of the best Loki performances in that movie.
It's true.
And speaking of redeeming and all that stuff, it's funny. So the day that I went to go see this, in the morning I was at work. I said, "Oh my God, I'm so excited to go see Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. This is what's going to get me through the day, even though I already know. And I said this at work in the morning. Even though I already know it's going to take out my heart, pull it, and show me my heart and put it back in my chest.
Mhm.
And I said it's going to be opposite of Ant-Man Quantumanium. That's going to make me excited and happy. It's going to make me laugh. And, so I knew
Yeah.
that those two they're going to be completely different just because
Yeah.
of the
Well,
way things,
I
hand.
what I'm thinking about those so far is that phase 4 is all foundation.
Right.
Like it's all building foundation, and it lays a lot of foundation.
Mhm.
It lays a bigger foundation than the first 3 phases are built on.
Mhm.
It lays a really big foundation, and Quantumania is our beginning of that climb back up the hill.
Oh, yes. And I can already feel the excitement. The energy that I'm feeling with Ant-Man Quantumanium already is different than the energy I felt with Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Like I already knew walking in that we were going to mourn and we were going to grieve. And I knew that we were going to honor both Chadwick and T'Challa. Like, and I felt they did very well on that. And as we go into this, I think that excitement will return. That's not to say that we're not going to lose characters that we don't already love, because guess what? That's one, it's part of life. Two, it's part of what happens. It's just what happens. And
Hey, the good news is that we're already talking about that huge the end of phase. Is it end of phase 5, or I guess it's the end of phase, or it's the phase 6, the big movies, the big Avengers movies they announced.
yeah.
So there's word out there that Kevin Feige is already trying to figure out how to bring in every major Marvel character that's been on the screen, and not just from the MCU, but from the X-Men universe, the Spider-Man universe, Sony Spider-Man
It
universe.
makes sense because they were already supposed to do that originally with Thanos in the first place. Like
Right.
She-Hulk was actually originally in that war. She was
Yeah.
also against Thanos. So it's not like we haven't seen it before. Technically, if they really wait, if I'm okay, I have to go back. If I'm correct, I think it was Deadpool's wedding or something where he was able to get like everybody's mother under the sun, every character you can name at the wedding.
Right.
That's funny.
For a wedding. Could you imagine? I mean, and okay, let's just be honest. I mean, part of it, a lot of people have already, people are already excited because they already know, like, now that we're going to get Deadpool again with, my brain's having a moment.
Hugh Jackman's Wolverine.
Yes, Hugh Jackman returning. And it's just already, the excitement's already rebuilding. There is an excitement in the air that's like, oh my gosh, so let's see how.
Well, and we've got the Secret Invasion show looks phenomenal.
Oh, and okay, so for a quick moment, I looked into one of my Marvel history comic books. And there was something in there about Captain America, but the agent, as the agent. And I have to go back, and it was interesting because there was like this little tidbit that he said something, and I'm like, wait, what? And I reminded myself I have to go back and either read it tonight or tomorrow. This little tidbit, and I'm like, wait, that's going to be important. I have a feeling.
Yep, it's all connected.
Right. And I think they're doing I think he's doing a decent job considering. I mean, he's got how many plates spinning right now?
Right.
And he's doing it, even if it's hard.
Considering the disaster that everybody else who's tried to imitate the formula has wound up with, kudos to him.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. But it's going to pick back up. We've already seen the announcements. They didn't take those announcements to San Diego Comic-Con on a whim. Like they knew what they had coming up. It's going to be huge.
Yes.
And it's going to come back. It's going to be as big as it ever was, and everybody's going to kind of forget about all the screaming and yelling, except for the people who just do that for a living.
And that's that's their freedom to do so.
Absolutely.
Enjoy it because I don't want any part of it. It's just not my, it's not my forte to I mean, even like Eternals, like I didn't fully like the movie, but there are things where I can go, but I like this and this and this, and I feel like these were also, it's like a movie that was full of lesson learning, so
lessons that maybe we should have learned when we saw Justice League and had a big team up that we were supposed to be invested in immediately. Just saying. But you're right, it does have its redeeming qualities. And I think that as we see those things, those story points become relevant increasingly as the next phase goes on, I think that, and in some ways, like there's some things about movies, it's like, yeah, that wasn't the greatest, but the more they utilize the lore set up in those stories, I think the more I'll appreciate it as groundwork. So
awesome. Well, I think we're just gonna probably just have to wrap it up there, or we can just sit here and talk all night. I think everybody's already left and gone to bed. I think
Deanna got really quiet.
I think Deanna must have fallen asleep, and DB must have fallen asleep, and Megan may or may not still be here.
Megan's probably still all excited from going to see the movie tonight.
Yeah. Oh, she is still here. Yeah. That's kind of how I felt. We had a 2-hour drive home, so we had a little time to decompress. So hopefully we've helped you decompress enough from having seen this movie that you can sleep tonight.
Yes.
All right. So as we wrap up, Nicole, thank you so much for coming on with us. And
love coming on here and talking Marvel and all this fun stuff with you guys. It's
absolutely. And it's great to have a good somebody with, especially comic book stuff. It's great to have somebody with a good comic book lore knowledge, because that is not me.
Try.
Well, we'll get you
to do as much research I can and kind of connect the dots.
Well, we'll get you on something comic book related when David's actually around at some point, because
I want to be there, like picking his brain. What do you do with this? What do you with that? It'll be fun.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad we got to help you process, Megan, because that's kind of that's sort of what Andrew and I did kind of on the way home. It's like processing all the things.
So before we leave, Nicole, we definitely want to give you a chance to tell us where people can find you and about your podcast and where to find it.
Well, on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, I am known as Peace Love Fandoms, but I am 1/3 of Rogue One Radio, which you can find again also on Twitter, Instagram, and also on Facebook. We are currently doing Andor reviews, but we're doing it in a very interesting way. Not only do we have really cool music every week that we feature up and coming artists, but we also have been lately doing it with planets and locations and digging into Andor in a different way. So this week I'm so excited because Dragon Buddy is joining us, and each week we've been actually adding a new guest co-host in with us. So very excited for that. So thank you. I'm so excited.
All right.
Marisha, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at princesses_and_padawans whenever I'm emotionally stable enough to be on social media. You can also occasionally find me on Twitter. P Padawans. I'm P Padawans on Twitter.
Awesome. All right. You can find me running the Twitter account for this show at sci_fictionary. You can find the Science Fictionary podcast and Coruscant Radio Underground anywhere that you listen to podcasts. You can also find our podcast as well as all of the rest of the Red 5 Podcast Network at Red 5 Network on Twitter or at bio.link/Red5.
Yep.
And until next time, guys, may the Force be with you.
This podcast is a member of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts and content creators, visit bio.link/Red5.